Hey guys, welcome to the Reparenting Daily podcast, your daily guide for inner child healing. This podcast helps you establish a consistent reparenting routine and is divided into 3 sections. The first is a daily reading, the second is a discussion of that reading followed by suggested journal prompts, and the last section is a peaceful meditation for closing. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from whenever and wherever you're joining us. I'm so glad that you're here as we continue on this journey of self-expansion and growth. If this is your first time, welcome. Now, before we dive in, I have a few quick reminders. Please like, share, and subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Your support here helps us spread the word, allowing us to continue to grow this community. Next, I'd like to introduce our Patreon group, where we have 3 weekly meetings. On Sundays, we have a meditation meeting. On Tuesdays, we have book club meeting. And on Thursdays, we have open topic discussions. These meetings take place at 6 p.m. CEST, so Amsterdam, Paris time. For my next announcement, I'd also like to introduce the Reparenting Daily journal, which you can find on Amazon. This journal follows along with the podcast, so each weekly and monthly themes are reflected in the journal. It provides space for you to keep your notes with plenty of extra resources on each topic that we discuss. It's an excellent tool, and if you purchase it, you can join our weekly meetings for free. Just send me an email and we'll get you linked in. For the last announcement, I'd like to introduce one of my most meaningful creative projects, a 3-volume series entitled Fairy Tales for Reparenting. Now, you might be wondering, why fairy tales? Aren't those just for kids? But through my personal healing journey and in studying the work of Carl Jung, Marie-Louise von Franz, and other spiritual and psychological traditions, I've come to see fairy tales as powerful symbolic maps for transformation. They carry deep, timeless wisdom, especially for those of us doing the hard work of reparenting ourselves. The series follows the structure of the hero's journey. Volume 1 explores the wounded child, stories of loss, betrayal, and innocence. Volume 3 is about the trials of endurance, cunning, and self-discovery. And Volume 3 is the return, stories of transformation, power, and wholeness. Each story is followed by journal prompts and space to reflect on how each story connects to your own inner healing journey. These are not just tales, they're tools. They're an invitation to connect with the part of you that still believes in magic and possibility and healing. You'll find both familiar classic and lesser-known stories from cultures around the world, offering you fresh insights and inspiration on your path. All 3 volumes are now available on Amazon. Your support means so much to me, not just for this project, but for the larger mission of helping myself and others reconnect inwardly. Reparenting is like nurturing a bonsai tree. It's not fast, it's not flashy, but with care, patience, and consistency, it will transform you. Thanks so much for being here and for supporting this work, and also for committing on your personal journey of self-expansion. Now, without further ado, let's dive into today's practice. Today, we're going to be listening to a video from How Communication Works. It's entitled How to Be Assertive and Speak Powerfully. Don't be too polite. You can find a link to the video in the show notes. Today we'll just listen to a portion, and then we'll have a reflection upon this. So without further ado, here is How Communication Works.
Hi everybody. In this video, I'm going to tell you how to speak powerfully and assertively. I'm Bruce Lambert from HowCommunicationWorks.com. Thanks for joining us. Let's get started. In the last video, I talked about politeness. Specifically, I talked about the relationship between power and politeness, and social distance and politeness, and ranking and politeness. But I just want to focus on power today. So the general rule in politeness is the more powerful the speaker is in relation to the listener, the less politeness they have to use. And there's an inverse version of that rule. That is, the less polite someone is with you, the more powerfully you'll perceive them, because we can read back through these expectations about power and politeness. So if someone uses a lot of politeness to us, they're being very deferential, and we can tell that they're bowing down to us with their words. They are deferring to us. So the example I often use is that in Japanese culture, for example, people actually bow. People actually bow to one another as a show of ritual politeness, ritual deference. So in the United States, we don't bow to one another. We show deference in other ways. We show deference verbally by saying please, by hedging, by beating around the bush, by being indirect, and doing all sorts of this other verbal deference. But nevertheless, we are showing deference. This was driven home to me in a study I did of pharmacists trying to talk to physicians. I gave pharmacists a task where they had to recommend a drug to a physician who had made a medication error. And they had to recommend an alternative. And most of the pharmacists simply wouldn't do it. They were too used to deferring to physicians. So instead of saying, I recommend drug X, they said, would you maybe think about trying drug X? Or they say, drug Y might not be such a good choice. So they would play all these games, deference games, to show their deference to the physician. In effect, they were bowing to the physician, but bowing verbally, not bowing physically like the Japanese might bow to show deference. So the key to speaking powerfully, ironically, is don't be too polite. Politeness is perceived as deference. Politeness is a form of verbal ritual deference. So assertiveness is the opposite of that. And power is the opposite of that. One of the ways we show power is by not showing verbal deference, not being too polite. So when you have a request to make or an offer to make or anything, we have to say something. If you want to be perceived as assertive and powerful in the situation, don't use too much politeness. Be direct. Say as direct as you possibly can. That means no hedging, no indirectness, no beating around the bush, no apologies. As direct as you possibly can. Think about the thing you have to say and think about saying it as directly in the most unvarnished, unadorned way that you can. That is the most powerful way you can say it, because the less politeness you use, the more powerfully you'll be perceived, because people know the rule about power and politeness. So when you refuse to use politeness, people will assume you must be a powerful person who doesn't need to use.
Welcome back. Now, if you've listened to this video, perhaps you've heard of him, or perhaps it's the first time. If you've grown up in a dysfunctional or chaotic family and are on the course of reparenting, you might be a bit shocked about the contents of this video. What I've come to observe is that many of the people who I've seen in different support groups, those who are on the process of reparenting, it seems that they are searching for some ideal connection that they should have received in their family of origin that they did not. But the fact of the matter is that all adult relationships are transactional. And that means the rules that we follow are different than those that we should have followed by a family of origin. The problem is that when we try to go into the real world with the assumption of finding these same nurturing real relationships in adult life, when adult relationships are only based on transaction. This is where many people are continuously victimized, because they're searching for something that only exists within childhood, within your nuclear family. The point then is to become increasingly aware of the realities of social life and social connection, because adult relationships and connection are about power and influence. That is not to discourage you, that is not to be negative or pessimistic. It's just the reality that most people who are in the course of reparenting do not quite grasp yet, especially if you've been isolated for some time. And so what becomes even more important then is learning the real rules of how the real world works. And this is a lesson that you might have missed out on. You might be trying to reach out and to connect with people under the guise of niceness, or under, not the guise, that sounds a bit like it's misleading or trickery, but with the pure heart intention of true connection, with the pure heart intention of seeing another, respecting another, uplifting them, in the attempts to recreate the connection that you never had. But something you need to understand again is that in the real adult world, that all relationships are transactional. Most people are not healing. Most people are not on this path because it requires a lot of effort, time, sacrifice, and dedication that most people either don't have capacity for or have no interest in pursuing. And so with that knowledge in mind, perhaps you can target and leverage certain groups, support groups such as ACA or other certain groups, to try to resurrect or rebuild or recapture what you missed in your childhood, to cover that need of being seen. But when you're moving in the real world, you have to operate by a different calculus. And that is also one of the reasons why I created this project, is because I felt that in all of the support groups and therapies that I was seeing, that people are being left still naive to how the world actually works. Yes, you've gained awareness to what you didn't experience and what you should have received, but to go into the world to search for that is almost a fool's errand. You must be mindful. Most of the world is not on this path. Most of the world is traumatized and looking for quick, easy wins. But you've chosen a different path. And it's important to be mindful of that because this is something that can really disrupt your careers, your friendships, your personal relationships, and therefore it's very important to be mindful of how you communicate with people, how you're actually coming across. Your eagerness to please and to be nice and kind and supportive will most likely be seen as a weakness by most people. That's not to be pessimistic, but it's just how the real world works. When everyone is moving fast, no time to really slow down or see each other. This is just the reality of the world. Not to be pessimistic, but just to accept how things really are. That's not to say that you cannot identify people with whom you can build real relationships to capture what you've never had. I'm not saying that's not impossible, but you must be careful and protect yourself in the process of searching out the real, because the world that we live in is mostly fake. So as we go into the journal prompts today, to reflect on this lecture, number one, interest take. What part surprised you the most? The bit about politeness equals weakness, or the idea that directness equals power? Why it works, it flips the spotlight onto interpretation and opinion, making them unpack their reaction. Number two, fair point. If you had to give just one rule from the video on being assertive, what would it be? Why it works. Force them into a narrow choice and subtly highlight how little they might have actually taken in. And number three, sure, but do you think being less polite ever backfires? Can we talk about your experiences when total bluntness didn't serve you? Why it works. It puts them on the spot to justify and reflect. And if they can't, it weakens their stance. That's it for today. As always, thanks for being here. Take care of yourself, and please do be well. Welcome back, welcome back. Now, this is the third and final section of the daily podcast. This is your silent meditation. Please go ahead and find a space where you can be comfortable and undisturbed, where you can relax and spend some time with yourself for this 10-minute silent meditation. You can choose to be sitting, standing, lying down, or in whatever position makes you comfortable today. Take a moment to simply be with yourself. Focus on your breath and gently connect with each part of your body. If thoughts arise, don't let them overwhelm you. Just observe them without attachment. Imagine them as leaves drifting down atop a river, passing by without needing your engagement. Stay present, grounded, and open to this moment, no matter what time you are listening and practicing this meditation. Namaste.